Now we consider a hypothetical that's quite complicated and at the same time very typical. Take a look with me at the call of the question. On what legal theory or theories and for what injuries might Albert, Amy, and Dora recover from drug co? Discuss. Well, we can use a little bit of intuition here. Why do you think it is that a drug company would be a defendant? Almost certainly because plaintiffs are alleging injuries arising out of their use of a drug. So, without even reading the fact pattern, we can guess that all three of these plaintiffs will be bringing products liability theories. And we know a basic checklist for products liability includes strict liability, negligence, and warranty. So, before we even read the fact pattern, we can sketch out each of these three people as plaintiffs against the same defendant. The theories of liability, tentatively, are the products liability theories. And remember, products liability itself is not a theory of liability. It's an umbrella under which sit three theories of liability: strict liability, negligence, and warranty. And notice here, we've only got one defendant. It's common in products liability cases involving drugs for a physician to also be a defendant, and sometimes a hospital. But here, we've only got one defendant. So that tells us also that probably what we're going to be doing is distinguishing between the plaintiffs. It's likely all three plaintiffs will be bringing the same theories of liability. Now, with all of that said, based only on looking at the call of the question, we go to the top of the fact pattern, and the first entire paragraph is about a type of birth control pills known as Bay-Ban. And in particular, look at the specific facts about the packaging. There's no explicit warning that this product is not effective with all women, although we are told that physicians are informed in the circular about the drug to the physician. In paragraph 2, we meet Albert and Amy. They're a married couple. They've got 3 minor children. They decide that they don't want to have any more children, and so the wife goes and gets Mill pills, a different contraceptive, and she starts taking those pills. In paragraph 3, our plaintiffs go on vacation, and Amy leaves her birth control pills at home and then borrows birth control pills that happen to be Bay-Ban pills from the people that she's visiting, and she takes those pills that are not prescribed to her. She ends up becoming pregnant. Now, that's really all we need to know as far as Amy's claim is concerned. And also, we can now see that whatever claims the husband and the other child are going to have will be subsidiary to her claims. So as we look at the call of the question, which mentions Albert first, as we think about how we would organize our thoughts about this answer, certainly we'd put Amy first, even though the call of the question is different, because analytically, all of the claims that could be made by a spouse or a child of someone that becomes pregnant while using birth control pills would be subsidiary to the actual user's claims. Now, go to paragraph 4, and here we find out that the doctor of the woman who lent the birth control pills had informed the patient that the pills weren't effective with everybody, but this patient doesn't tell Amy about this fact. And there's nothing on the package, as we learn from paragraph 1. So certainly the claims are going to be based on products liability, strict liability based on the defective absence of a warning, negligence, again, alleging the same facts, but now the plaintiff has to allege actual fault on the part of the defendant, and then breach of warranty. Then, and by the way, we can pause for a moment, and many of you may be quite hostile to this plaintiff's claims. And as you come to know me as someone with something of a defense bias, you might expect that I would find that Amy really can't sue. But in fact, I think the proper result would likely be that Amy, in fact, would be able to recover because the problems for the company in putting a simple warning on the box are de minimis, whereas the problems for Amy are severe. And if we are going to find for strict liability on behalf of Amy, it's this defective warning or absence of a warning on the package, which is really her sole basis for making that claim. And by the way, if you were to write an answer to this question concluding that this plaintiff should not recover, I think you'd be in the minority. And narrowly speaking, I think it's likely you would be incorrect. But that's only with regard to strict liability. If you chose to find that she should not recover in negligence, perhaps also in warranty, I think you'd be on somewhat firmer ground. And I would grant that a fairly persuasive argument can be made that this plaintiff should not recover in strict liability. However, once again, I think probably the better result would be that she would be able to recover. For what, we'll consider in a moment. Now, in the next to the last paragraph, we find that both Amy and her husband Albert have suffered severe emotional distress as a result of this unplanned pregnancy. They're worried about their money, and they are having trouble sleeping at night. And that's good enough to establish severe emotional distress. We see that Amy has been treated by a psychiatrist, and that the 17-year-old daughter, Dora, the last plaintiff, also has been terribly upset and has been seeking psychiatric treatment because now it looks as if her parents won't be able to afford to send her to college. Now, look at the last paragraph. Amy refused to consider an abortion. Now, what issue could that possibly go to? Answer: mitigation of damages. Now, ultimately, we would certainly not require this plaintiff to undergo an abortion in order to reduce the harm caused by the defendant. Still, this is a tricky question with regard to damages, and it also could be something of a slippery slope. Suppose we agree for a moment that the birth control pill manufacturer is going to be liable to Amy. Then the question expressly asked in the call of the question is, for what? What injuries will she be able to recover for? Well, I think for the purposes of this question, we could agree that pregnancy is an injury, although it is certainly natural as well. But since the pills are designed to prevent pregnancy, I think that a pregnancy would certainly be considered an injury. So, how do we measure damages? Is it the cost of prenatal care and delivery? Is it the cost of whatever postnatal care is required? Would it be maintaining this child up until the age of 18? Where would we draw the line? And the answer is, I think, up to you. And certainly on the multi-state, questions could be crafted in such a way that one answer would be better than another answer. So there's no substitute for reading the answer picks carefully on the MBE. And you'll find plenty of practice MBE questions and a fair number on the real exam, probably, dealing with products liability involving drugs. Then we see that the pregnancy is normal, successful, and we have a child born who is healthy and well. So we don't get additional damages questions involving a child who is born with some severe illness. Well, turn the page and take a look at the outline of issues that I present. As you'll see, I spread out the issues starting with Amy. I changed the order of the call to make the response easier to write and easier to organize. And I think, by and large, that's entirely okay, really on any bar exam. A somewhat better constructed question would have mentioned Amy first. So we've already considered strict liability in some depth. But look at how I break up the issue for analysis. I talk about the defective product first to establish that there is something the matter with the Bay-Ban pills. Then we go to foreseeability and proximate cause. And our first reaction often is to think that a woman that would borrow birth control pills is stupid. But stupidity goes to a defense to negligence. That would be some sort of contributory or comparative fault or assumption of a known risk. But the problem with that is this risk was not explicitly known. Now, most of us who have been able to get into or out of law school are fairly sophisticated. But we judge products liability on the least sophisticated consumer standard, as you'll learn as you get into greater practice. So almost certainly, this plaintiff is going to be able to show that the product is defective and that she's a foreseeable plaintiff. The damages issue is somewhat complicated. At a minimum, I think it would be prenatal care and well baby treatments. After that, I think it would be prudent to draw a line with regard to the remedy. And the defenses of drug code of strict liability really aren't existent here. they messed up and they're likely to be liable at least up to some reasonable point. The same facts that Amy would allege for her strict liability claim also support a negligence action. But here, the stupidity or carelessness of this plaintiff would certainly be taken into account. And if, in fact, Amy knew that different birth control pills had different types of chemicals in them and a different balance of hormones, I think it's likely that she could be denied a recovery altogether in negligence. Let's put it this way. That's a case I would be willing to take to trial on the defense side. With regard to breach of warranty, here again, I think that it's likely that we could draw a line just based on the lack of privity, but technically the law of warranty conceivably could extend to cover Amy as well. Whether or not a breach is present, again, we rely on the same facts, and she's got a greater likelihood of establishing a warranty claim than she does a negligence claim, I think. Next, we turn to Albert versus Drug Co. Here, we don't need to rehearse the elements of the theories very well, because we've done it already with regard to Amy. But Albert's going to be bringing the same basic theories of liability, and he is one step removed. With regard to strict liability, I do think that there is a reasonable chance that Albert could present a fairly convincing case that the husband of a woman who becomes pregnant while using birth control pills would foreseeably suffer harm. I certainly think that he's got a credible argument to that extent. Whether or not he prevails or not, I think is probably going to be up to a jury. But I certainly think he's got a better claim for strict liability than my first reaction was. The more I thought about this question, the more I thought that Albert's actually got a fairly good claim. Now, with regard to Dora, here I think that although, again, her best claim would be strict liability, at some point we've got to draw a line based on foreseeability. And I don't think it would be unreasonable to deny Dora a recovery altogether as a result of the foreseeability issue. But at the same time, those of you who are going to grow up to be aggressive plaintiffs' lawyers or who are already practicing plaintiffs' law in one jurisdiction and are reviewing this seminar to get ready for a different bar exam, you might want to take her case as well. That case might have some financial value. So that wraps up a consideration of a very standard type of products liability question. We look at some products liability questions about defective products and others for a subset of products, defective drugs. You'll see plenty of questions like this if you aggressively pursue practice.